Dun, 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 dun.
I finally get to talk about Hillbilly Elegy. That took a while. Believe it or not, and some of the movies that I've said in the past, if I'm covering a new film or maybe something that has a long-standing franchise I've not accustomed myself to, I tend to be the person who likes to do homework. I like to be familiar with what I talk about. And so for me, Hillbilly Elegy required some homework because I had not read the book. And I knew going in, I'll explain maybe lightly why in a minute, but I knew going in I wanted to be able to do some reading for it. And my schedule gets so hampered that it's like reading. I used to love it as a kid. It was a very foundational experience for me and like a first love in many ways, but I just don't have as much time anymore. But I knew going into this movie that I wanted to get that general sense for where the plot's going. It sounds like a fun movie. Again, it's a Netflix production. I can't say I'm going to watch this immediately. This is going to be on Netflix. I'm currently I'm looking at this in 2021, so yeah, really late. I'm currently right now in my Cuties boycott phase because I do not believe in giving any money over to Netflix right now while the company is behaving the way they are and keeping that project up. I'm looking at that Texas indictment case with very hopeful eyes because it's not just Hillbilly Elegy that I have to delay. I have to delay Stranger Things 4. I have to delay Cobra Kai. That one's really upsetting to me because wasn't that on YouTube? Why'd you have to make the switch? It just makes me really upset. But anyway, I'm not on Netflix right now. I am covering Netflix content, just more so from the vision of like, oh, what can I'll have a bunch of content to watch whenever they remove that movie, and I hope they do at some point. I think they will. But we'll see where time goes. But Hillbilly Elegy is one of theirs. I believe it went for maybe some awards as well. Ron Howard's directing. I love his work. And as well as the cast here, Amy Adams and Glenn Close both star. I'm very excited to watch this film. Now, I will say going into this, I kind of a funny story of how I approached it originally, because I knew, Hillbilly Elegy was coming out. I'd heard it was based on a book. I knew nothing about it. But I won't say who exactly. I know there's videos on YouTube that point to this about the reception from the audience versus the critics. Another situation here, we have the wide berth of critics who hate a movie versus the audience who loves the film. The reasons why are different. There seems to be maybe some political ire with connections made. And that's familiar territory, unfortunately, of a lot of critics. They aren't as well-reasoned as you might think. The audience tends to be a little better informed, as we've seen over the years. Now, specifically with this film, I came across, I'm not going to say who it is, so you might be able to guess, but I came across one review that I was laughing at first, but I'm like, the more I thought about it, I want to do one better here, because I personally, I'll say it this way. What I remember specifically from that review, and I'm paraphrasing here, was in one statement saying, again, this won't be the exact wording, but I haven't read the book. And then a couple of statements later going, J.D. Vance is a horrible, horrible person. I went, well, that's quite the jump. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, you haven't actually taken the time. Well, I think this person actually took the time to maybe do a little bit of research. But, where are you reading the research from? Because I imagine after listening to the book, again, the critic response, some of that information is probably skewed one way. Again, the political connections, I noticed them. I know where people go with this. Or not people, but, some people, but your bigger corporations that might want to establish things a certain way. So where exactly is that information coming from? Because, again, I think I can imagine when you say that J.D. Vance is a horrible person without doing the research of, actually learning his story, which is articulated in Hillbilly Elegy, because it's a memoir. So for me, as somebody who tries to not offer blind critiques or ideas based on loose or twisted foundations, I prefer to do, the homework. I prefer to actually take time to invest myself in the truth, right? So for me, I'm like, well, I need to do something. I'm going to read the book rather than jump into the movie. I've floated between this in between. I like book to movie adaptations. I cover this, in different ways. For me, sometimes I'm like, well, I might like to be, reading, or I might like to watch the film, notably like fictional stuff, because then I'm like, well, I don't know exactly everything going in. But maybe with a movie, again, or maybe like a true to life adaptation, like with Hillbilly Elegy, I prefer to do the research and understand where I'm going in terms of the general, the narrative. Because, movies will not completely take all those experiences, verbatim. And I understand this is sort of like an adaptation rather than a memoir in form. It's more so just taking J.D. Vance's story and translating it in an illustrative, cinematic way. So long story short of Hillbilly Elegy, that was my foundation going in of hearing that, he's this horrible person, and me going, well, I want to know why he's a horrible person, right? I would like that question answered for me, especially since the fact that the person who said that never read the book. I mean, that's from personal admission. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to read the book and I'm going to learn what I think about him. And I have to say, I think that critique is absolutely ill-founded. Actually, okay, technically, I listened to it. It's easier for me to listen right now than it is for me to read. I listened to the book at about like, I finished it in one day, actually. I listened to it about 6 hours. J.D. Vance, Hillbilly Elegy is actually a very interesting read. Now, I didn't come from his background, but I can certainly share in some of the experiences, because I think they are, I mean, for those of you who haven't read the book, and you want to, I have younger viewers, so I'll say it this way. For the adults, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a really riveting read. For kids, he uses some coarse language at times, and there are, if I remember right, a couple topics that might be better served reading that maybe with a parent or something. Just again, maybe like being age appropriate. I don't know how many kids will be interested in reading Hillbilly Elegy. Maybe something just comes later in life. But just out of, just saying this, right? Just being upfront. For adults, though, it's a very interesting read. For me, I personally, Chapter 4 really stood out to me as well. I mean, there's so many good little elements to the piece where he talks about just his experiences and things that he went through. And there's very transformational experiences. You can certainly see that, especially where he is today. I know for a fact that I think he said he's running for is he running for Senate, I think? I wish him luck. But we'll see, where he goes with that. But anyway, the book it just paints a very interesting picture on his background, a lot of his experiences, and I will personally say, even though again I don't share word for word in his life and what he went through, there are elements that stand out to me and experiences that were loosely tied to my own. Chapter 4, he talks about in school, and more so from the thematic, I think, perspective of fostering a sense of internalized motivation, which I would definitely agree that it's like, yeah, I think we don't tend to view that in today's society. I think we've really lost the art of, hey, being a, I've got a very entrepreneurial spirit. I'm fiercely independent. So for me, that's just something that personally resonated with my characters. I read the piece, but I do think for a lot of people, it's like, do we really, strive the merits of the individual person as much as we could? I don't think we do. Chapter 4 made this very clear to me when he talks about his experiences in early education, where he had a teacher, and I might be getting some of the details mixed up, because it's been a little while since I read the book, or listened to it, but he talks about how his teacher in a mathematics setting it's sort of like how she or he, I don't remember exactly, had a sort of reward tier system. So if you were able to do addition, for example, as most of the kids were, because that's what they were learning at the week, she'd give you a piece of candy if you did the problem properly. Now, J.D. Vance talks about how he wanted to, essentially like prove himself, right? And I might be getting some of the wording wrong here, but he does subtraction. Again, just to establish like, hey, I went the leg up, and the teacher gives 2 pieces of candy, and then he said he also was dethroned by another student who did multiplication, and then he got 3 pieces of candy. But just the idea that there's a sense to reach to something greater, especially when you talk about education. I came from that background. My mom was a teacher, and I will definitely say, and I've kind of hinted this in the past, maybe I've said it directly, that I'm not an advocate for where the education system is today, specifically speaking of in public school. I can say this, my mom had regrets. I was in public school very early on. I was homeschooled for about 8 years before I went into college. Yeah, I started getting homeschooled in 5th grade. So I pulled up a system around 4th. So I was in the public school system around 5 years. And I'll say it this way. My mom had me reading very early on. She took those teaching experiences. She actually left the teaching field because she had me, and she was pregnant with me at the time. And then she introduced me just to things earlier on when I was younger, like in the preschool years. So when I came into kindergarten, I was already reading at 2nd grade level from what I can remember, from what she's told me. The teachers, and she had specifically asked if some of the teachers could have afforded me like separate work that I could have done to keep my skill levels up. Essentially, that never happened because the school instead was like, one teacher, I remember she specifically saying like, well, we want to keep him with the other kids. We want to keep him like socially attuned, which is, I guess, fine. The problem was, and I'm not saying this again to be disparaging, but when I was in kindergarten, again, I was already reading at 2nd grade level. When I was going into school, we were talking about, like, you guys remember cut and paste? Like, take the cotton ball, begins with a C, and put it on the sheep. Sheep sounds. Yeah, that's kind of what it was. I remember the curriculum in particular that was teaching this. But again, it was just going to school in that capacity, it was below my level. So my mom, what she would do, and she spent so much time doing this, is I would come home, I would do my schoolwork, I'd get it done probably in just a few minutes, and then my mom would give me supplemental work, essentially to compensate for what the school was not doing. Which she had asked, as the parent, which she could have. But again, my mom wanted to foster that. So when I hear this chapter, it just reminded me of that idea that, I think that my early experiences with education, that was shared, right? There was a push for striving for greater. Another story I probably actually, speaking of specifically the award system, or the reward, kind of that, again, that tier idea. My mom had actually said at one point, there was and this was like back when I was, how old was I? Probably about 6, I think. She had bought me, because I used to collect Lego Star Wars toys as a kid. She had bought me, I think, set number 7133. It was ever the Attack of the Clones one was with the air speeders. She had bought me that on the caveat that I would read about 100 books of her before I opened it. And so I read about 100 books of her that night. And that was, again, sort of, there was something to work toward. There was a goal in mind. I mean, granted, they were picture books, so it was different. But, I mean, they weren't like the most basic reads. Some of them were a little more challenging. The stuff like we picked up at the local library we had on hand. But I read 100 books of her. And again, that was the goal at the end of the rainbow, so to speak. So for me, when he talks about those experiences with like the candies and stuff, I just remember hearing that. I'm like, I was kind of taken back to my personal experiences where I grew up. Now, again, are they exactly the same? No. But they're similar enough. But fundamentally with Hillbilly Elegy, and he tells so many other cool stories. It's just so interesting to learn J.D. Vance's foundational years and just a lot of the stuff he went through as a kid that, in some capacities, I mean, some of the things were not cool to learn. It was kind of like some heavier topics kind of got thrown in. But again, to hear this, just this dynamic life at such a young age that was just so foundational to him, and in many ways I would imagine it connects with a lot of other people, in life, and different variations. I thought it was cool. So I don't agree with the sentiment that he's a horrible person. I think, he's a man that explained a lot of his story. His experiences were pretty. Sometimes, they were either very revealing or at times very shocking. But I think he's definitely a man that's learned a lot. I do not agree with the take that he's a horrible person. I think it's kind of, again, ill-founded. And I'm glad I read the book to actually do the homework of learning who J.D. Vance is. Because I'm like, well, I want to give a fair representation to them, and I think certainly the critics have not painted the best reflection. But let's go ahead and take a look at Hillbilly Elegy. Like I said, it's going to be a little while until I get to watch the film for myself, because, again, I'm boycotting Netflix right now because of cuties. But I'm excited to watch the movie. We're going to go ahead and watch this first. I love the book. So I'm like, I want to see a visual film. I know it probably won't be entirely the same, because when you translate things again from a book to a movie, things shift, right? Run times, drama, it's not a perfect reflection. I'm sure, hopefully, it'll be very respectful. We're going to go ahead and watch this first, and we're going to talk about it more in my condensed review segment. Phone us watching the video together. Okay, Hillbilly Elegy. Without further ado, I've wanted to cover this movie for so long. Here we go. Let's take a look. It took me long enough. Okay. And hopefully this trailer reminds me of some of the things I might be forgetting. Because, again, it's been a little while since I read the book.
Be all right. Be happy. I know I could have done better. But you got to decide. You want to be somebody or not.
He kind of looks like a J.D. Vance figure to me.
Good. I just had a down month.
We'll see how the
I got
acting
an interview
works.
tomorrow, Mom. Otherwise,
Oh, you know me. I always land on my feet.
Don't look at that. Come on. Don't you look at you. Look at me. You look at me.
You let her get away with this every time.
I told you that I would do better.
You always say that. You're lying.
I always try.
You got to think about these kids.
What do you think I've been thinking about?
Again, it's
since
been a
I
little
was
while, but I
18 years
remember.
old, huh?
I loosely
Never had a
remember
life
some of
where
these
I wasn't
elements.
thinking about the kids.
But I remember Grandma was, or Mama,
you wanna be dead,
was
Mom? Or are you
instrumental
just too lazy
in
to try?
Vance's founding years.
Plenty. You've always got a reason. It's always someone else's fault. Some point, you're gonna have to take responsibility, or someone else is gonna have to step in.
Who? Huh? Who? You?
Award-winning performances. I can certainly see that.
How many times you've seen this?
Oh, about 100. Everyone in this world is one of three kinds. Good Terminator, a bad Terminator, and neutral.
You're a good Terminator.
Well, I wasn't always. I had to learn. You could too.
I love you. I promise that I'm gonna do better.
Honey, you got a right to your own life.
Don't make us your excuse, JD.
Family's the only thing that means a goddamn. You'll learn that.
It looks like a very respectable take. It's just, again, I wish it were a little sooner, but I were covering this because I remember elements. I just don't remember everything. But some of these details here, specifically what you're seeing for the film, it's like, yeah, I remember the broad strokes. I remember, again, that there was some calamity with the mom, or Amy Adams' character, but Glenn Close's grandma being a very instrumental figure in his childhood, especially in his development, and just kind of, again, how he went through those early years. And I do think, the guy who's playing J.D. Vance, I don't know his name, I've never seen him before, but he, I think, looks like the real life J.D. So this is very interesting. I mean, I think it does, again, I've been a fan of Ron Howard for some time. I loved Solo, by the way. Not a perfect film. I mean, forget L337. It was actually, I think, underrated. But, we know what happened with Solo. It was just The Last Jedi toured that one. But I think it was actually a well-done Star Wars movie. And Ron Howard did come in. I mean, how much of that was set up by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. But I wish I got to see their take as well. But Ron Howard did a good job, I'd say. I respect his work quite a bit. And this looks like it's a very high quality. Again, I know he's a revered name as well, so I know people immediately will flock to his projects. As it seems a lot of people did with Hillbilly Elegy, including the critics. But maybe the audience was a bit nicer. And I think will be, because I watched the trailer, I'm like, yeah, you know what? This paints a very sympathetic picture, and it does seem in line from what I remember with the book. What are your guys' thoughts with Hillbilly Elegy? Let me know down below. Don't forget all the good stuff. But like, subscribe, and sharing that bell until we get to watch more from maybe Netflix in the future, maybe a different project altogether, maybe another book to movie adaptation. I will see you guys for a point. That's it for now. Thanks for watching this video. I love you guys. Don't forget to love social fellow man. God bless and peace.